Okay, well, let's go ahead and get Scott started. You ready, Scott?
I am. Let's do it.
All right, excellent. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I'm Lucinda Andriani. I am the Deputy County Manager and Flood Control District Administrator. And this evening, the purpose of having this meeting is, we're going through a lot of processes to implement the sediment reduction measures, both on private property and on the U.S. Forest Service property. And the purpose of the meeting tonight is specifically revolves around the fact that we have discovered that on a small parcel that the city owns north of Linda Vista holds remnants of the historic Beale Wagon Road. And those of you that were invited, I think some of this was explained in the letter, various letters that you've gotten. But I'll take this opportunity to introduce Scott Courtwright. Scott is with NRCS. He is their archaeologist, and he'll get into a lot of the details of this process. But one of the first steps that we needed to conduct was Scott conducted a survey of all the potential properties that may be impacted by this project. And he identified that there were remnants of the historic Beale Wagon Road on this city parcel north of Linda Vista. I think many people in the community understand that the Beale Wagon Road, there are many remnants within our area of the Beale Wagon Road, and this particular parcel had it. As a result of that, there is a requirement that we go through a process dictated by a national law. It's called the National Historic Preservation Act, and there are specific sections within that act that dictate if you're using federal funds for a project, which we are here, we're using the NRCS Emergency Watershed Protection Funding. And as a result of that, using that funding, when you do find historic or prehistoric other cultural artifacts, you have to go through a process. And it's NRCS that leads that process, but they have to work in concert with the State Historical Preservation Office and officer. So we are marching through that process. And this is one of kind of two important permitting processes that we have to go through to ultimately finish the engineering and construct any of the sediment reduction measures that are being pursued by the district, flood control district. So, and this is a legal requirement, and we're holding this meeting specifically to inform those within this broader project area that they have the right to be what's called a concurring partner. And Scott will explain what that means. But through this process, ultimately what gets generated is a memorandum of agreement of which the city, the district, NRCS, the State Historical Preservation Office, and other possible concurring parties will sign that agreement. And you as a property owner within this area, it's called the area of potential effect, and which is throughout, doesn't just involve this parcel that belongs to the city that had the remnant, although there are no other parcels that we identified that there were any remnants. All the parcels that are in this project area, Mount Eldon Estates, the 40 acres north, few parcels within Lockett Ranches, potentially some properties off of the the channel that runs behind Paradise, that they are within this area that they deem this area of potential effect. And he's going to explain more about what that means. That's why you were invited to this meeting tonight, because you have the right to sign this agreement as well. And so we're informing you of your right. This is part of that process. You also got a letter that informed you about this as well. So we're wanting to make sure that you are fully informed that you have that right. So with that, we're marching through this process. Tonight, this meeting is solely to discuss this process. We are not prepared to share the plans for the project. As we've indicated from day one, the way the process needs to work relative to the engineering planning process, development of the plans, is that the plans now are at, I'll say, a draft 30% stage. Alan Hayden and Mike Carley with Natural Channel Design are now out beginning to meet individually with the property owners whose property we believe at this time will be impacted by the project physically, either because we have to enter through the project, through that property to get to the project, or we're planning to construct something on the project. It's extremely important in this process that those property owners with a direct impact be spoken with first and individually, so that they can provide input to Alan and Mike relative to the proposed plans. To do otherwise would not be appropriate because they're getting the direct impact. And so they're in that process now. They've initiated these one-on-one meetings, and those will take place. When those conclude and they finalize the 30% plans, review those again with the district and NRCS, then they will be shared more broadly with the broader area. But it's very important that the individuals being impacted have direct input. Now, this area of potential effect under this section of the National Historic Preservation Act, that area is broader than those are going to be directly impacted. So there are a fair number of you that are been invited to this meeting tonight that will have no action taken on your property whatsoever. So don't assume that because you were invited, you are going to have an impact on your property. So, or like most, I think, feel will have a benefit, will be beneficiaries of the project. So we're going through that process. It's important that without securing approvals with this memorandum of agreement, we cannot move forward with the engineering nor with construction. So this is a key element to this process. And not only can we not go forward with engineering or construct on that individual property where the actual Beale Road is located, but we can't construct anywhere within the project area. So this, if we aren't successful in arriving at this memorandum of agreement, then we can't go forward with any piece of the project. So that's really important to understand. So this is a very important process. So again, you don't have to necessarily consent to this in an affirmative way, but you have to be informed that you can elect to be a concurring party and sign the MOA, that memorandum of agreement. So that's kind of how this ties into the project, why this isn't so important, why we're having the meeting. And Scott, again, will get into the details. And I'll turn it over to him shortly. But there is a second process that many of you have also received a letter about recently. And the second permitting process is with the Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps of Engineers has some level of authority over this Spruce Avenue wash and drainage. As a result of that authority, we have to secure a permit from Army Corps of Engineers as well to construct the sediment reduction measures, both on private property as well as on the Forest Service. With the Army Corps process, what's important to understand, as you saw in your letter, is that in effect, what is happening is the district and the district's engineer, Natural Channel Design, will apply for this permit. And in doing so, we are in effect acting as your agent because you've been deemed, again, within this broader area where there could be impacts to private property from the project. And so, and when I say impacts, meaning construction. However, once again, the area being considered by the Army Corps is broader than those properties that where we will actually do construction of the sediment reduction measures. So the Army Corps of Engineers requires that those parties, those properties that have been identified within that area have to sign a document, the form that was in the letter that was sent to you, that basically grants us the ability to apply for the permit. Now, fortunately, the Natural Resources Conservation Service Emergency Watershed Protection Program has a standing permit with the Army Corps of Engineers. It's called Permit 37. And so the types of measures that we are planning to construct are authorized under that permit, but we have to document with Army Corps what we are doing. Obviously, we have to share the plans with them, share the information, and document that, in fact, the measures are consistent with that permit. And if we document that, then we would expect to have the permit issued. And again, we cannot construct nor finish the engineering without those approvals. So returning those forms that were mailed out to you, and again, some of you, we would never touch your property, but we still have to have the form signed and returned. And again, if you have any questions on that letter, and a second letter is going to go out tomorrow, again, requesting that you return the form as soon as possible. We are in very, very tight deadlines to make the ability to be able to construct anything this spring before monsoon. We are in extremely tight timelines. And so please return those forms. If you have questions, there is a name and a phone number and an email address on there for Charlie Wilson, who's with our team, and he will try to help explain if you have questions. In no way is granting us the ability to submit this permit transferring any rights to access your property or to construct on your property. That is a completely different process that will be undertaken, where with the district, you will have to sign a cooperator agreement. And with the city, you will need to sign an easement. You will need to agree to an easement. And so that this in no way conveys any right to enter your property, nor does it convey any right to construct on your properties. That's really important. I think we emphasize that in the letter. Just want to emphasize that again here tonight. So there's a completely separate process, and that will have to be completed again before we can construct. So I think that kind of covers those two permitting elements that we've been communicating with you about. And again, as Alan and Mike meet with you individually, they will review these with you again as well. But again, if we don't secure those forms to relay to Army Corps, then we cannot proceed. So it's extremely important. So if you have questions, if you have concerns, please contact us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Courtright again. He is with NRCS. He is their archaeologist, and he is the one managing this process with the State Historical Preservation Office, which I must say, they have been very cooperative with us. They're working, they understand the gravity and necessity of the public safety nature of what we are experiencing and what we're trying to accomplish with the sediment reduction measures. And they've been very cooperatively, they're moving the process as quickly as they can legally. And so, and Scott has just done a fantastic job working with us. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Scott, and he's going to walk through some of the details of this, and then we'll take some questions again related to this topic tonight and answer those questions. And I'll talk more about future communications when Scott is done. So thank you. And so I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Lucinda. That was a very good summary of the process. You really nailed the cultural resources component. So you did a good job. As Lucinda mentioned, my name is Scott Corwright. I'm the state archaeologist for the NRCS. And my responsibility is to ensure that NRCS projects follow all applicable state, federal, and local laws. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through the process of what we've done to date for the Museum Fire EWP project. One of the things that Lucinda mentioned was the area of potential effects. And so this is a very strictly defined component of Section 106 process, and it's the geographic area or areas within which an undertaking may directly or indirectly cause alterations in the character or use of historic properties, if any such properties exist. So I like to look at this as, this is your sandbox. So when they're looking at the project and what they want to do, we'll go out and we'll cover a much larger area to allow them to design and not be constrained. If we go out and do a survey and then they make it bigger, we have to go out, the APE expands. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So in the summer of 2021, let's see. This is the Museum Fire project area from the summer of 2021. And this was last August, and these were the emergency measures. This is the APE for what was done very quickly, and they instituted quick emergency measures within a very short time frame. So that project area has actually been included with our current project area, which you can see is much larger. The APE on this map is the orange polygon, large area up at the top, then a bunch of the narrow areas along Spruce Avenue Wash that were covered in August. And then down here near the bottom is the Linda Vista parcel, where there's the City of Flagstaff parcel. So when we're going out and doing identification, field survey is the most common way of going out into the field and identifying historic properties. During that process, myself and other archaeologists or NRCS personnel would actually systematically walk the entirety of that area that's shown on the map. And we'll look for artifacts, we'll look for features. And when we were doing the survey, we were also accompanied by natural channel design. So we were able to work with them to ask questions and cover all the areas that we needed to in an efficient manner. So during our survey, we found 2 sites in this most recent survey. We have one prehistoric site that was going to be avoided by the project. It's been a very direct effort by the engineers in the county to make sure that the design and what they're going to construct will avoid this site. So because that site's being avoided, we're not really going to discuss it much anymore tonight, because the second site is the one we're most concerned about. It's one that many of the folks that I've talked to when I was out there are very, very much aware of, and that's the Beale Wagon Road. So we actually have 2 segments of the Beale Wagon Road that we identified during the project. The one, it's the focus of this discussion is on the City of Flagstaff parcel that's shown on this map. So that hatchet area is the actual limits of the City of Flagstaff, and that red line is the Beale Wagon Road. Some of you may be aware, but the Beale Wagon Road was constructed beginning in 1857 by Edward Beale. And this road was one of the first military roads in Arizona, and it spans the north half of the state. And the segment we're dealing with is, it's a relatively small, it's only, 1,000 feet long, but the Beale Wagon Road in total is over 1,200 miles long and connected Fort Smith, Arkansas with the Colorado River. So the wagon road within the APE looks to have been in use up until the mid-1950s. And after that, it's only occasionally shown on maps, so probably wasn't used that often. So I'm just going to show you a couple of photographs here of the Wagon Road within the city of Flagstaff parcel. And you can see it's, here's a view of it. Not really remarkable. It's really just a 2-track road. In this area, they didn't have to do a lot of engineering to build the road. So for the most part, they just cleared areas. And it just would be used as it got more defined as it was used longer. So here's a good photograph. All these trees are growing within the bed of the Wagon Road. And I think this is probably the best representation of the Wagon Road within the project area. This is where it's following the actual Coconino National Forest boundary. That's that fence line on the left side. During our survey and recording of the road, it's important to note that the only feature that was documented in the APE was the actual road bed. We didn't find any features or artifacts that were associated with the early construction of the road. And artifacts were limited to just a small number of cans and bottle pieces from the probably 1950s, if not later. This is just a photograph of an interesting thing. Just on the north end of the project area on the Coconino National Forest side is an actual brass cap commemorating the Beale Wagon Road, which just further reinforces that this is the actual Wagon Road. And then the Boy Scout Troop 33 erected this wooden sign on a tree within the city of Flagstaff parcel, recognizing the road. It's kind of a neat little touch that, this road it's pretty important. Actually, it's very important. And it's for being as old as it is, and the preservation of it's real hit and miss across the state. It's really neat to see that, just a Boy Scout troop would recognize that and put up a sign to commemorate the road. So one of the interesting things about the Beale Wagon Road is it goes across the entire north half of the state, but there's not a whole lot of documentation that's been done of the road, except for on the National Forest lands. Coconino and the Kaibab National Forests have both done quite a bit of work and have some publications that do a really good job of presenting the road and its history on the forest. But there's no comprehensive document that looks at the Wagon Road within the state from border to border. So the Beale Wagon Road is, it's been determined eligible for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places, called it the NRHP. This is the federal government's official list of district sites, buildings, structures, and objects deemed worthy of preservation for their historical significance. This Wagon Road, its significance falls within early military roads in Arizona, of which there are not too many. So we've completed the survey, we know what's in the APE, and now our responsibility is to assess how the project is going to affect cultural resources. Like I mentioned, we identified a prehistoric site that's going to be completely avoided during the project. But the Beale Wagon Road obviously is not going to be avoided in this one location on the city of Flagstaff parcel. So when we're looking at historic properties, we're looking at project effect. So that's just evaluating the project and the impacts to cultural resources that include direct impacts from construction, staging and stockpiling, and access routes. So the road, even if it wasn't going to be, say, destroyed by something, if it was going to be crossed by an access road, or they're going to stage materials there, we'd have to consider ways to protect the site or mitigate the site if that was not possible. So the one segment of the 165-year-old Beale Wagon Road that cannot be avoided measures about 1,000 feet long. Because it can't be avoided and it's going to be destroyed essentially by the project, the lingo is adverse effects. So for the project, no matter what else is happening elsewhere, the impact to this one historic property in this one location causes an adverse effect for the entire project. So adverse effect triggers what Lucinda mentioned was the development of a memorandum of agreement. So I'll get into that in a couple minutes here. But so we know we have the segment of the Beale Wagon Road, and so I want to discuss what we're doing to mitigate the impacts to the Wagon Road. As you saw in the photographs, there's really not much to it. It presents as a 2-track road. So in consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office, City of Flagstaff, Arizona State Museum, and some other parties, we determined that an archival study of the road within Coconino County would be a very appropriate mitigation, and it will result in a management tool that can be used for future projects in the county. So we're taking this one little area where there's a small section of a road that's going to be impacted, and we're using that as an opportunity to set the stage for dealing with the road throughout Coconino County from here on, once this report and this project is done. So in addition to the archival study, one of the key components is going to be the preparation of maps and geospatial data of the recorded segments of the road and historically mapped locations of the road. So that'll involve a consultant going through general land office maps from the mid 1800s, late 1800s, and bringing that data all together to present that comprehensive picture of the road within Coconino County. So right now we're at the point where we've developed a memorandum of agreement, and that was developed with NRCS, the Arizona State Historic Preservation Office, the Arizona State Museum, City of Flagstaff, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the Flood Control District. So the MOA is basically a roadmap for how cultural resources will be dealt with during the entirety of the project. And as Lucinda mentioned, the MOA, once it's signed and executed, is the actual cultural resources clearance for the project. So until the MOA is signed by those agencies listed above that I just mentioned, the project can't start. So that MOA was just dropped in the mail yesterday. It might have been out today. So it will be going to all the private landowners within the APE. And as Lucinda mentioned, some of the landowners may not have actual project work happening, but they were within the APE that was defined for the project. The MOA will also go to Native American tribes and in any other interested parties that notify NRCS that they'd like to participate in this process. So when you all receive the MOA, that'll be accompanied by a letter and then the actual MOA document, which is it's a little over 30 pages right now, a majority of those of which are signature pages. So the MOA being distributed to everyone is simply a legal requirement of Section 106 to consult with private landowners within the APE, regardless of whether construction will happen on that land or not. So signing the MOA is not required by concurring parties, and concurring parties are private landowners, tribes. What is necessary for the MOA to go into effect is that it be signed by NRCS, the Arizona State Museum, City of Flagstaff, Corps of Engineers, and the Flood Control District. So when you get the MOA, you can sign it if you'd like to, and if you don't want to, you don't have to. By signing the MOA, that only signifies your acceptance of the approach and methodologies to be used during the project regarding cultural resources. And as Lucinda also mentioned for those other agreements, the MOA is not a blank check for NRCS or the Flood Control District to do what they want on your land. It is simply an acknowledgement and a choice to participate in the Section 106 process regarding the Beale Wagon Road. And that's what the bulk of the document, the MOA, contains, is how are we going to move forward with documenting this wagon road and what's going to be the end product of it. I think one important thing to mention about the wagon road is our mitigation strategy is an archival study and generating maps and geospatial data. There will be no excavation or field work along the road within this area. And that was came to agreement by everybody involved in the process, because we doubt that there's any buried deposits related to the wagon road. I know a lot of times when people think about archaeology, there's screens and shovels and trowels, but for this project, the value that we're going to get from the wagon road in this project is actual literature and historical documents, and then bringing that all together. So when you do get the MOA, if you have questions, feel free to contact me. My contact information is in the letter that accompanies the agreement. If you do choose to sign and participate in the process, you are more than welcome to scan or take a photograph of the signature page and email it to me, whatever way is easiest for you. And I think the big thing that we're going to get out of this when the archival study is finalized is going to be a report that will present historical information about the locations of the road, where we think the road may be based on historic maps, where we know the road is based on cultural resources surveys. And this document will be a tool that will be available to certain agencies, probably available to also professional archaeologists for future planning. I think this whole project and actually dealing with the Beale Wagon Road is a great opportunity to set the stage for defining how the road will be documented and where it will be. And I think it's going to be a really powerful tool for Coconino County moving forward. And it's just the beginning, I think, for understanding the Beale Wagon Road and I think recognizing it more throughout the county. And NRCS is, really fortunate and really happy to be able to do that for this project. So that's all I have. That's a quick talk about the process and where we're at. So I will turn it back to Lucinda if you have anything to add, Lucinda, or do we just want to go to questions at this point?
No, I think you did a great job, Scott. I think that, again, just to reiterate that it's not required, unlike the Army Corps process where it is required that you provide the form granting us the ability to be your agent. In this case, it's not required, but you have the right to, be a concurring party. So as Scott indicated, that will be mailed out to everyone within the area of potential effect. And then you can make that decision. I assume, Scott, there's some associated deadline within that time frame. There's some time frame that's provided. Again, we're moving this as quickly as we can within the legal framework. So if you want to do it, certainly let Scott know soon. So because the intent is we will be taking it to the board of directors of the flood control district for their review and approval. And the county attorney has already reviewed it and is comfortable with it. So, and I think the city, of course, will be moving through a similar process. So with that, I've got a few closing comments and then we'll turn it over to questions. Again, in terms of future communications. So this meeting tonight really, again, solely focused on this one aspect of the project. And because this was part of what was the overarching agreement with the state historical preservation officers, that we conduct this meeting and inform you of your rights. And so once Alan and Mike have completed the individual meetings that I referenced earlier with those property owners who may be impacted by the project, meaning either have to access through your property or construct on your property, the sediment reduction measures. Once they complete that, we'll be finalizing those 30% plans. And the intent right now, I haven't worked out the details with the city yet, but the intent is to do an area-wide meeting at that point and share those plans. But again, it's extremely important that we meet with those individual property owners first that are going to have construction on their property so that they can have those conversations that are necessary because obviously we can't construct anything anywhere unless they ultimately agree to either a cooperator agreement or an easement with the city. So that's going to be really, this is a really key piece of the process. So I would expect that this communication will probably take place somewhere toward the end of March is our timeline. And we're moving very quickly. And the intent is to move very quickly and to finalize plans and to move forward. Now, in terms of the overall timeline, the goal remains for the project components, and I'll come back to what will allow us to do this, but because there's a lot of different things that have the stars really have to align here to be able to move forward, complete the engineering and move to construction. But the goal remains for the project elements that are on the Forest Service property, the Mount Eldon Estates property, the 40 acres north of Mount Eldon Estates, as well as Lockett Ranches, that project, those components will move forward this spring and into early summer. The sediment basins project proposed in the Paradise area will not go to construction until this fall. There's the complexities surrounding that project are such that it just isn't possible to do that. And there's just a whole range of complexities. Some of the issues that will influence our ability to finish and construct anywhere are, one, the weather. And it's an interesting dynamic. If it's too wet, we can't get equipment in. If it's too dry and we get equipment in, we may have Forest Service restrictions because of fire hazard. So, it's what do you wish for, right? But I love seeing the snow. We needed it desperately. The permitting processes that we just walked through, both with the SHPO, State Historical Preservation Officer, and with the Army Corps Engineers. Those two, we have to secure those permits and approvals. We have to secure that approval through the Forest Service, the National Environmental Policy Act approval, the NEPA process. They are going through their own NEPA process for this work to take place on the Forest Service property. And that work on the Forest Service property is really critical to reducing sediment entering the city and all the areas, frankly. Much of that work is being done on the edge of the burn, right? Just within the burn area and the edge of the burn area. And then of course, below the burn area in the areas we're discussing. We also have to receive approval from NRCS and the Forest Service for the actual plans, what's actually being proposed to be constructed. They have completed their review of the 30% plans, and Alan and Mike are in the process of integrating in their comments to those plans. Fortunately, so far things are looking pretty positive. Any utilities that have to be relocated to construct must be conducted before we can actually construct the features. So, and this is particularly the case in the Paradise area. We have to secure the cooperator agreements and the easements to have the right to enter your property and to construct. We have to have that legal right. And the county attorney actually signs a form that goes to NRCS that validates that all that was done in a legal and proper way. And back to the earlier comments, and this is why those Army Corps of Engineer forms that we sent out are so critical for you to return. So please return those. Again, if you have questions, please call or email us. And again, that does not convey the right to enter your property, nor does it convey the right to construct on your property. It's just to allow us to act as your agent to secure the Army Corps permit. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. I think we've got a handful of folks with us this evening. If anybody has any questions on this process, I'm sure Scott will be happy to answer those. And if there are other questions, again, I'm going to stay away from the project details. We're not ready to have those discussions yet, but if there's other types of questions, I'll do my best to answer them or tell you if we're not prepared to answer them. So Mark, will you explain how people can ask questions?
Sure. So probably the easiest way would be to raise your hand. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a little raise hand icon. Click on that and we will open it up and allow you to talk so we can converse with that. You can also type it into the Q&A on the bottom. or the chat, and we can do it that way as well.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
So if you have any questions or anything, go ahead and raise your hand. All right, Mark, do you see any hands raised or any?
I just saw one. I saw Dustin. So Dustin, I'm going to allow you to talk. And if you could, okay, I think you're unmuted. Hi, Dustin. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Terrific.
Hi, my name's Dustin Diano. I live on Paradise there. I was just curious with the Beale Wagon Road, if it's kind of discovered that goes through my property in some way, will that restrict, I guess, how I can use my property there or anything? Like, I'm just curious how, when you figure out where this road actually goes, if it'll affect me in some way. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. For the most part, the Wagon Road outside of the area where we recorded it on the City of Flagstaff parcel, it's no longer preserved because of just development and just the long-term use of the area. There's really, if it's private land, there's really not much that will stop you from developing on it. I don't know if you're within the City of Flagstaff limits. I think you might be, but the City of Flagstaff is a certified local government. So they do have historic preservation ordinance that would have to be considered if you were planning on doing major development on your land. And I think the trigger for that would be, drawing permits or, having to go through a design review process. But otherwise, another option is if you have a larger parcel of land and you want to develop it, you can always have a consultant do a cultural resource survey. That's often done for parcels of land that are larger, not necessarily for just historic roads, but Flagstaff has a very rich history with prehistoric sites and a lot of habitations, and there's those sorts of resources that come into play. But as for the Wagon Road being on your property, I would imagine there's probably little evidence of the road remaining there if it's downstream of where it's recorded on the City of Flagstaff parcel. But once you get up on the forest and go up into Mount Elden Estates, there's a couple of areas where there's a higher potential for it being preserved. But in a lot of the locations that we did look where the road was supposed to be or may have been based on maps or previous projects, there was no evidence of the road in those areas.
Great, thanks, Scott. And I think the important point there, Dustin, is that he did survey the areas that we may have an impact on, and he did not locate any other evidence. So at least in that area that was surveyed. So thank you for a question. Great question. Any other questions that we have come up, Mark?
I'm not seeing any. Let me see. No, I see that. It looks like
A minute.
Scott Overton has a question. Or did I get that wrong, Scott? Let me see over here. Yeah, okay. Okay, Scott, go ahead and unmute. There you go.
No, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lucinda. I just wanted to chime into your group and to your meeting, and let you know I'm representing the City of Flagstaff this evening, and Public Works and kind of the representative for the project area. We've all, of course, been working in tandem, and I just wanted to not convey support or anything of the like, but to let you know that we're apprised and we appreciate being at the table. We're working with our residents and with our staff to try to go through this process, and wanted to let you know that we appreciate the invite, and we'll stay engaged in this process as you go through it. And we're happy to support and provide any details or information you might need as we go along, and we try to move some of these mitigation projects to the next steps.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate, working with the city, and this, obviously the parcel is owned by the city, and the city is is in effect, the plan is that once constructed, that it will be operated, so to speak, maintained by the city, and it will continue, the ownership will retained by the city. So the district pursued this grant to secure the funding to engineer and construct it, but then it will be turned over to the city. So, all right, with that, any other questions? Anybody else have any other questions? So
I'm not seeing any.
I don't see any. So, well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. Thank you, Scott, for good information. And again, it will be available. There'll be a second letter going back out tomorrow, again, to remind people to turn in their Army Corps of Engineer forms. And that will also have the link to this video. So if your neighbors say, gee, I couldn't participate, but I'd still like to hear what was shared, they can certainly go in and access this meeting through that venue. So it's also Mark put it in the chat, but it will also be in the letter as well. So with that, everyone have a great evening, and we'll look forward to talking with you in the not too distant future. So thank you very much. Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Mark, for putting this all together.
Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure. Good to meet you, so to speak. And I
Likewise.
I hope we get to maybe touch base in person.
One of these days.
Yeah, that would be great. All righty.
All right.
Take care.
We'll
now.
go home and have a nice evening. All right.
I'm getting my rabbit's foot out for driving, so you bet.
All righty. See you later. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.